These are currently all the best options from every major camera manufacturer for a vlogging camera. With the release of the Canon R50V, there's now more options than ever for creators to get into the new camera ecosystems of various brands, so I thought it would be a great opportunity to go over all the new creator cameras that are, no EVF, tilt flippy screen, and made specifically for people who make vertical and horizontal content on online platforms. And I wanted to go through all of the features that I find important as an online creator, what I think of them, giving them a final score, and also hopefully create some form of buying guide for people who are looking for that kind of resource. Today we're going to be going over the Nikon Z30, the Sony ZV-E10 and ZV-E10ii, the Canon R50V, the Fujifilm X-M5, and the Lumix S9. So if you would like a quick summary of my thoughts before committing to the entire video, just know that the Osmo Pocket 3 is a really great option and very compelling, even with the price hike, that there are a lot of really great compelling options with 10-bit, great recording codecs, and even some full-frame options at a specific price point. And generally speaking, you get what you pay for. So if you spend more money, you will get more features in return for that. And I think that that is something to keep in mind. If you're a budget-conscious creator, you might want to go looking on Facebook Marketplace on the used market, because a lot of these cameras are now coming down in price for used prices. And I'll put some of the prices on screen right now of screenshots that I found. Really great deals to be had. Used cameras are very usable. Putting together this list also took quite a while, so I would really appreciate it if you could like this video and subscribe. It just helps let YouTube know that you enjoyed this video, and if you didn't, then give me a dislike. So let's start with the prices of all of the cameras. Obviously, that's probably the most important part. At the cheapest end, we have the Nikon Z30 at just under $600. Taking a step up from that, we have the Canon R50V coming in at around $650 with no lens. We have the Sony ZV-E10 Mark I, that's around $700 new, but you can find it much cheaper used. Following that, we have the Fujifilm X-M5 at just around $800, which is a great deal in my opinion. Next up, we have the Sony ZV-E10ii, that's just under $1,000, and I think that's also a great deal for the features that you're getting. And then, of course, we have the Lumix S9, which is retail $1,400, and of course, it's going to be the most expensive on the list. But the next column is the reason why. All of these cameras have a Super 35 or APS-C size sensor, a crop size sensor, except for the Lumix S9. So you are paying more money for the larger sensor, and I think that you get a lot of great features from that, but at the same time you have to consider that full frame lenses might be larger or more expensive than APS-C lenses. So it's just something to keep in mind. It's not necessarily a pro or con, it's just kind of what you want to do. So next, let's talk about bit depth for the cameras. And as someone who really cares about color, this is probably the second most important part to me. We have most of the cameras being able to record in 10-bit, and then only 2 cameras still recording in 8-bit in 2025. We have the Nikon Z30 and ZV-E10 Mark I doing 8-bit. Those are minus points. I don't think that it's unusable. You can definitely still get a very decent image out of those cameras. But if you're someone who is just starting out, having the flexibility of 10-bit is going to be super important for your work, and then you'll be able to grow into it as a creator later. So 10-bit is very important. All the cameras except for those 2 have 10-bit. Next, let's look at resolution and recording formats. So all of these cameras can shoot in 4K. The 8-bit cameras can only shoot in 4K 420, that is the 420 8-bit codec. On the ZV-E10ii and Canon R50V, you have a 4K 422 10-bit codec. And then for the Fujifilm X-M5 and the Lumix S9, you have 6K recording and a 422 codec. So you get some really great codecs on the more expensive end, and Fujifilm being able to record in 6.2K open gate for a sub $800 camera is just absolutely insane. The X-M5 is a great value. If you need to record in higher resolution for any reason, that's your camera. Next, we're going to go into the default color that comes out of the camera. This is a very subjective category, but at the same time, you want to make sure that what you're recording before you learn how to use log or 10-bit or anything like that is a good looking image. So for the Nikon Z30, I don't think that it has a good picture coming out of the camera by default. It looks a little flat and the skin tones look a little bit, gray. I'm not super into the image. The ZV-E10, you need to do a lot of tweaking to the image to get a good looking image out of the camera. You can of course record in S-Log2, S-Gamut3 Cine, and apply some log LUTs to that and get some nice images. That's what I did when I had the ZV-E10. It's a lot more work and most beginners won't be able to do that right away. Then for the rest of the cameras, you have pretty good out of camera color. I wouldn't have any problem shooting on those cameras and delivering to a client or posting on social media with any of those cameras. I think it would look good. But the Lumix S9 takes the lead here, having much better skin tones and just an overall more pleasing image to me personally. So let's talk about overheating, because some people are going to be doing long videos like I am right now, and they're just recording one long take and cutting it up into pieces afterwards. So let's go over what overheats and what doesn't. The Nikon Z30 has overheating problems. Not good. The ZV-E10, I never managed to make it overheat, and it worked pretty well for me. The ZV-E10ii, I never managed to make that overheat, but that's not to say that it can't. I've seen some tests done by other YouTubers where they get it to overheat, and I mean, good for them, but I don't see most people overheating the ZV-E10 Mark II. The Canon R50V will not overheat. I doubt it's going to overheat. It's not doing any crazy computations. It's also the newest camera out of the bunch, so I think its thermals are pretty good. The Fujifilm X-M5 does have issues with overheating, so maybe don't shoot all day in the sun with it. I have no idea. Just keep that in mind when you're recording for long takes, that you want to make sure to give the camera breaks in between takes, or you could get one of those fans that suctions to the back of the plate. I'll put up an image of that right now. And then the Lumix S9 does not have any overheating issue. Now we should talk about stabilization. I find this to be also a very important point when choosing a camera. If you have good stabilization, it means that you can get shots that you wouldn't be able to otherwise. And if you have bad stabilization, Lord help you, there's no amount of Warp Stabilizer or DaVinci Resolve that can fix that. So for sensor stabilization or in-body image stabilization, the Z30 has no IBIS. The ZV-E10 Mark I has no IBIS. The ZV-E10 Mark II does not have IBIS either. The Canon R50V does not have IBIS, and the Fujifilm X-M5 does not have IBIS. The only camera with IBIS is the Lumix S9, and then on top of it, it has some of the best IBIS on the market. You're getting class-leading stabilization out of the Lumix S9. It is more expensive, but it has the stabilized sensor. Now let's talk about e-stabilization. A lot of companies will save money in the sensor stabilization department and choose to use technology for e-stabilization. Usually it crops in on your image, and a lot of people aren't huge fans of that. So e-stabilization for the Z30, not good. I've seen the footage, super shaky. On the ZV-E10 Mark I, I'd say it's awful. I have personal first-hand experience of the rolling shutter and e-stabilization combining to make just a terrible looking experience. The ZV-E10 Mark II, it's pretty good. I'd say the e-stabilization, it does crop in a bit, but it's much more stable than the previous generation. The R50V has good e-stabilization. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it's pretty good. And the Fujifilm X-M5 also has pretty good e-stabilization. The Lumix S9 once again pulls ahead here with almost perfect e-stabilization. You pretty much can't go wrong with the stabilization on the S9. When you're combining your IBIS with your e-stabilization, you're able to get gimbal-like shots that are just impossible on all the other cameras without a gimbal. Now we're going to go over the log gammas available to each camera. The Nikon Z30 does not have log, so we don't need to talk about it. The ZV-E10 Mark I does have access to Sony S-Log3, but since it's not a 10-bit camera, you would rather record in Sony S-Log2, and then you could get the most dynamic range without having banding or the image breaking. Everything else has your standard logs for the cameras. You have F-Log for Fujifilm, V-Log for Panasonic, C-Log3 for the R50 Mark V, and S-Log3 for the Sony ZV-E10ii. So for the lens mounts, I'm just going to let you read what they have here. The only thing of note that I would say is the RF mount on the R50V is actually a point against the camera because the RF mount is closed. There are no third-party autofocus lenses that are really available. There are some that you could use just on the R50V from Sigma. However, if you were to upgrade your RF mount later down the line to, let's say, an R8 or an R5, you wouldn't be able to use those Super 35 lenses on the full frame sensor, and you could only buy Canon glass. So that's just something to keep in mind before you get into a system. Make sure that the lens mount that you get is the lens mount that you want. So in this section, we're going to talk about third-party lens support. The Z mount has third-party lens support. It's pretty good. The Sony ZV-E10ii mount has the best third-party lens support, so that is probably the easiest system to get into. RF mount, poor support, not very good. The X mount, great support, no full frame lenses, you only have Super 35 lenses because all X mount cameras are Super 35, so that is points for the X mount. And then the L mount is an open system. It doesn't have every single lens. It does have a great choice of lenses to have, from Leica to Sigma to Lumix lenses. You have a lot of options, so pretty much everything besides the RF mount is a good option. Now we're going to talk about autofocus on all the cameras. Pretty much every single camera has good, usable autofocus. I'd say the only thing that doesn't have good autofocus is the Fujifilm X-M5. You're going to struggle with the autofocus on any Fujifilm camera. If you are going to try and do some serious filmmaking with it or heavy moving shots, that's going to be pretty difficult. If you're just doing this kind of video where you're talking to the camera and you're in one place, I think you'll do fine. But otherwise, you might look at another camera for autofocus support. Here's another important thing to think about: rolling shutter. Do we care about rolling shutter on cameras? Apparently a lot of people do. So here are my thoughts on the rolling shutter for all of them. Pretty much all of the cameras have usable rolling shutter except for the ZV-E10 Mark I. It is so bad that if you were to use that camera on anything but the most stable gimbal and tripod, you see waves appear in the image. In my opinion, using the Sony ZV-E10 while moving is impossible, and it makes it really hard to justify using that as anything but a tripod camera. Now we can get on to the final category, which is Dualbase ISO, and here I just wanted to point out that for the Sony ZV-E10 Mark I, you don't really want to push the ISO. The noise becomes unbearable after a certain point. I have a lot of experience with that camera, so it's just harder to use it with more noise. It's not a low light camera, not very good. So for base ISOs for the cameras, the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II has 800 and 2500, great ISOs. The X-M5 is a little strange. Its base ISOs are 125 and 500, so not a huge boost, but definitely still usable. And then for the Lumix S9, you have 640 and 4000. I think that's a really great usable range. You have that low light mode, you have the daylight mode. It looks really good. So now let's go over our final scores for all the cameras. You can see them right here. I'm just gonna go over my thoughts and kind of share with you each score for the camera. So for the Nikon Z30, it gets a 3 out of 10. Not really feeling this camera. I feel like it was a huge misstep when they launched it. There were a lot of pieces that they were probably just throwing together and getting it out to market to compete with the Sony ZV-E10. It doesn't have a lot of features going for it. There's no log, it's 8-bit, and I don't really see it being a big seller for Nikon. If you're a creator who has Nikon lenses already, you're better off saving up for like a Z50 or a Z5 Mark II. Both of those cameras are much better and honestly more usable. The ZV-E10 Mark I was my first mirrorless camera. I give it a 5 out of 10 because there are just much more compelling and more affordable options on the market right now. If you can find it at a great used price, let's say around $300 to $500, it becomes a much better camera. If you get a ZV-E10 Mark I for, let's say, $350, it becomes a 9 out of 10 for value. Great camera, good to learn on, terrible rolling shutter, but you can get pretty good color out of it if you know what you're doing. The ZV-E10 Mark II gets a 9 out of 10. It's almost perfect. I'd say the only thing it's missing is maybe dual card slots or some other thing. I had it for a little while before I upgraded to the FX30. It is a great camera. You can't go wrong with it. It is more expensive, but you get what you pay for. Wonderful choice. The Canon R50V, I give it a 7.5 to an 8 out of 10. Obviously, Canon knew what they were doing when they were making this camera. It looks really good. I think that the main thing holding it back is actually the lens mount. If it wasn't an RF camera, it would be a much better camera in my opinion. The price is good, it's just that you don't have third-party lenses, so you might be paying a little bit less for the camera, but the lenses are going to be much more expensive in the long run, so it loses points for that. The Fujifilm X-M5 was actually a sleeper. After looking at the specs of everything and kind of doing my comparison with this chart, I realized that the X-M5 might be the best camera for most people because a lot of people want to have a stylish accessory. If you get a small pancake lens and put it on the X-M5, the style actually, it looks like a beautiful camera. You can take it with you. It's much smaller than the rest of these options. The autofocus isn't perfect, but I'm sure most people won't care about that. I'd say that the 6K open gate recording and the 10-bit really make it a much more usable camera than you'd think, and it is a camera that you can grow into, so I give it an 8 out of 10. Great buy. Also really good price, $800, you can't go wrong. And finally, we come to my favorite camera of the bunch. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased. I shoot on L mount, I also shoot on E mount, but I mostly shoot on Lumix cameras. I think the S9 is honestly a steal. You can find it used for around $1,000 right now. If you pay the full price of $1,400, I still think you're getting a pretty good value. If you're not a photographer and you're just a video creator, you could take the Lumix S9 all the way from making YouTube videos to going onto a professional film set and doing BTS. It has wonderful image quality, 14 stops of dynamic range, 6K open gate recording. The stabilization is absolutely insane, and once you get used to using stabilization in combination with great autofocus, you're gonna have a hard time going back to using other systems that just don't have that level of stabilization. It makes walking around with the camera so much easier because you're able to get shots that you wouldn't be able to get otherwise. And the full frame sensor on the S9 is also just a great sensor. I love using it. It's in my two S5 IIs, and I think it's probably the best value full frame camera on the market right now. So now we come to the miscellaneous categories, and this is kind of where I want to mention 3 other cameras that I think disrupt this market a little bit. The first and most obvious is the DJI Osmo Pocket 3. That has a lens included, it has a gimbal included, it records 10-bit video, and it works well with wireless microphones. It has a much smaller sensor. It's got a 1-inch sensor, so it's not really that good in low light. And the image, it's not like a full log gamma. D-Log M is not a full log gamma, but it's still pretty good. Is that a good camera? I'd say that most people would be happy with the Osmo Pocket 3, but if you want to evolve your career, that camera won't take you as far as some of these other options. Then of course we have the compact cameras, the Sony ZV-1, which I'd say only the version 1 of that series is worth looking at because of the stabilization. The ZV-1 Mark II has a weird focal range, it doesn't have stabilization, it's no good, and the ZV-1F is a bit of a joke of a camera if you ask me. I would not put any money into that. The Canon PowerShot V1, which is the new revived PowerShot, is actually a very good option. It has full log gamma, it has stabilization, it's got a good zoom range. Again, the main issue with these compact cameras or action cameras is that you cannot grow your skills as much without the flexibility to try out different focal lengths. So I leave that decision up to you. The prices are on screen for all 3 of those. You might consider looking at those, but again, I would say that buying a proper dedicated camera will take you further. And that's the video. I think that there are some really great options. You get what you pay for the most part, and I would say that if you're looking to buy one of these cameras, any of these cameras, if you could find them used on a good deal on eBay, Facebook Marketplace, or even a friend who's trying to get rid of a camera, you're much better off doing that than buying it new from a store. If you can't get it any other way, most of these cameras offer incredible value, and anything with a score above a 5 is honestly worth buying. So thank you so much for watching, and if you feel like I missed anything, please let me know in the comments.